Welcome back. I am Daniel, and I thought I had a solid marriage. I was 31 when all of this started, and for most of my adult life I had been the kind of guy who liked simple things. I worked in maintenance, which meant I spent my days fixing what other people broke and my evenings trying to keep my own life calm. My wife, Brina, was 30 and worked as an emergency room nurse. She was sharp, fast, and the kind of person who could walk into chaos and somehow look composed. When we first met, that confidence pulled me in. We met at a backyard barbecue at a friend's house about 5.5 years ago. It was one of those easy summer nights where nobody is trying too hard. Brina made the first move in her own way. She looked at me, smiled, and said I gave off problem solver vibes. I remember laughing because it sounded like a compliment and a test at the same time. We ended up talking for hours. We walked to the grocery store for ice and came back with pistachios, 2 lawn chairs, and a stupid little joke about a dog that kept stealing sandals. That was the kind of thing that made me think, this is different. We clicked fast. We had the same kind of humor, the same habit of turning small errands into adventures, the same love of quiet nights that felt like a win. We built furniture together, argued over cooking shows, and had a 2 for Tuesday tradition where we taught each other something small. I showed her how to set a drywall anchor properly. She showed me how to fold a fitted sheet without making it look like a surrender flag. We had a shared list of places we wanted to visit someday. We rated taco stands on a 5 salsa scale like we were experts. It was goofy and warm and easy, and I thought that easy meant safe. I proposed under a string of mismatched patio lights in somebody's backyard because I am not exactly a romantic movie lead. She said yes, and we got married less than a year later. For a long time, life felt steady. Sundays were for Costco runs, too many samples, and then roasting a chicken while we argued about which cooking show cheated the most. The radio in the truck played our old songs, and she would do this little dance in her seat that always made me laugh. I would tap the steering wheel and we would end up smiling at nothing. It felt like being on the same team without having to think about it. That was the baseline, that was the life I thought I had, and honestly, I thought everything was fine. I really did. About 2 years into the marriage, little things started shifting. At first, it was just mentions of her ex, Logan. The first time she brought him up. We were watching a dumb action movie and she said, Logan would have loved this. He was big on practical effects. I let it go. People mention old relationships sometimes. It does not always mean anything. Then she said, Logan used to rub my feet during movies. Then later, Logan always made me feel like a queen. That one landed differently. It did not sound like a memory. It sounded like a comparison. Like I was being measured against someone who was not even in the room. I told her I did not want to compete with a ghost. She rolled her eyes and told me she was just telling me how she wanted to be treated. Looking back now, I should have seen it coming. A few months later, I was cleaning out our shared cloud storage because it kept warning me that it was full. I opened her photo folders to move some files around, and I found dozens of albums. Most were normal, family stuff, work stuff, random pictures of meals and sunsets. Then I found a huge block of photos of her and Logan. Concerts, road trips, mirror selfies, pictures where his hand was barely in frame but still there. I asked her why she still had them. She shrugged and said she had not gotten around to deleting them. Then she told me not to make it a thing because she did not even look at old pictures much. I said okay, but I did not feel okay. I filed it away as a warning, but at the time I had no idea how much that warning mattered. After that, she started going out more. Brunches turned into afternoons. Afternoons turned into nights at a friend's place. Her phone was always face down. She got new clothes, new perfume, new energy. At home, though, she got colder. In bed, she felt distant. She would turn away from me like there was a line down the middle of the mattress that I was not allowed to cross. Kisses became quick. Touch became polite. Every time I tried to close the distance, she had a reason not to. When I asked what was going on, she told me I was getting old and boring. That hurt more than I want to admit. I was 31. I was not some relic. I worked hard, paid my bills, kept the house running, and tried to be a good husband. My idea of a good night was fixing the truck, eating something decent, and going to bed without drama. Apparently that was not exciting enough. The fights that followed were not loud, but they were heavy. She would answer simple questions like I was interrogating her. Then she would go silent and scroll her phone while I sat there feeling like a stranger in my own marriage. One contact stayed pinned at the top of her messages every time I walked into the room. I noticed. Of course I noticed. I just did not yet know what I was seeing. Then came the Tuesday night that changed everything. She sat on the edge of the bed with a smile that looked rehearsed and told me she was pregnant. We had always used protection. We had talked about kids but agreed it was something for later, not now. Our budget was already tight enough without adding a baby to the mix. I felt the floor drop out from under me. I asked how. She just shrugged and said sometimes things were meant to be. I remember staring at her and thinking that meant nothing. Meaning is not a method. But I held her anyway because that is what you do when your brain has not caught up to your life yet. I went quiet. I started thinking in straight lines instead of feelings, and that was when I began paying attention to every detail I had been ignoring. The next day, I heard a notification sound from her iPad, then another, then another. She had named the device Alarm, probably so it would not look suspicious when it went off. I was folding laundry in the hallway when the screen lit up. The preview showed enough to make my stomach turn. Elle free after he leaves. Elle missed that video from last week. Elle used the same hotel. I remember standing there very still, not because I was calm, because I was trying not to fall apart. The brain does strange things in moments like that. It tries to protect you by making everything feel unreal. I hit the power button, but the sound had already told me enough. Those were not alarms. Those were receipts. She had used the same 4-digit code on everything for years, the old house number from when we still had a porch swing and a lot more trust. I typed it in before I fully decided what kind of man I was being in that moment. The iPad opened. Her messages were right there. The thread with Logan was at the top. Blue bubbles, gray bubbles, hotel names, times, photos, short videos, and enough detail to make denial impossible. I did not confront her right then. I took pictures of the screen with my phone. I exported the conversation. I emailed copies to an account she did not know existed. I moved slowly and carefully like I was handling live wires. When she came home later, I acted normal. I watched a sports recap. I nodded at the right moments. She kissed my head and told me she was exhausted. The next morning, I tested her with a simple question about the iPad passcode. She gave it to me without hesitation. That told me everything I needed to know. Over the next few days, I collected more. Messages, photos, hotel confirmations, call logs. I built a timeline. I named the folder Insurance because I wanted something boring and practical. That detail matters. Remember it, I kept going to work. I still took out the trash. I still made dinner. I still asked if she needed anything from the store. On the outside, I looked like the same husband. Inside, I was building an exit. I pulled my credit reports. I secured my accounts. I enabled fraud alerts. I documented serial numbers for my tools. I photographed every room in the house. I got copies of her insurance and human resources documents. I created an incident log with times and license plate sightings. I checked router logs and exported bank records. I made a burner email just for court documents. I sent duplicate files to my brother in another state. No cowboy moves, just paperwork and timestamps. When people lie, clocks do not. Judges love clocks. Then I found the debt. Brina already had about $80,000 hanging over her head, roughly $45,000 from a master's program she had quit before finishing. About $20,000 in maxed out cards for boutique fitness, clothes, and weekend trips. And another $15,000 in cosmetic dentistry on a payment plan. I had already helped pay down $20,000 before I knew what kind of person I was married to. That part still stings when I think about it. The more I learned, the more I understood that this was not a single mistake. It was a pattern. She was not drifting, she was choosing, and every choice was happening while I was still trying to believe in us. Looking back now, I should have seen it coming. The plan that finally formed in my head was not elegant. It was not noble. It was practical. I remembered a line from a movie about business and consequences, and it stuck because it felt cold enough to match how I felt. I was done making emotional decisions for someone who had turned my marriage into a side arrangement. I waited until she fell asleep on the couch one night with a podcast murmuring in the background. I took the iPad and found Logan's contact. No last name, just a letter, a number, and a profile picture that looked like it had been chosen to impress strangers. I did not need to hack anything. I just changed the number in the contact card and saved it. Then I sent a text from a burner number pretending to be him. I kept the tone short, urgent, familiar, the kind of voice that expects to be obeyed. I asked for a favor. I asked for $15,000. I said it needed to stay off the books. She responded exactly the way I hoped she would. She offered to send it through her card because the transfer would flag her bank. I told her to use the app. She did not hesitate. That was the part that made me feel sick. Not because I was surprised, because I was not. She sent the money willingly, $15,000, straight from her card, straight into the account I had set up for the exit. I moved it immediately into legal fees and a separate account. I was not trying to get rich. I was trying to get free. Then I waited again. That is the part nobody talks about. The waiting. You do not pull a thread like that and expect the whole thing to unravel instantly. You sit there and listen for the first crack. When the real Logan texted her later, she asked what the money was about. I answered as him one last time and told her not to text about it. Then I archived the thread and put the iPad back where it had been. The whole thing felt unreal, like I was watching myself from across the room. A few days later, I sat down with a lawyer, a real one, not some guy at a bar with opinions. We went through everything. The affair, the debt, the money transfer, The timeline, the pregnancy, the lawyer did not look shocked. He looked prepared, which made me feel better than I expected. Then I filed for divorce before the birth. I contested paternity. I froze joint accounts. I canceled joint cards. I stopped covering her debt. I kept my premarital assets, my truck, my tools, and my credit. I got exclusive possession of the house. Every move was documented. Every move had a reason. Every move was legal. When I confronted Brina, it was on a Saturday morning in the kitchen. She was making pancakes like we were not standing on the edge of a collapse. I put the iPad on the counter and asked if there was anything she wanted to tell me that did not start with a lie. She looked at the screen, then at me, and said, "It is not cheating." I laughed once because I thought maybe she would finally realize how absurd that sounded. Instead, she told me Logan had said during intimacy that he was going to get her pregnant, and she believed he meant it. She said she owed him this. She said he had never dated anyone after her. She said he wanted a family. Then she pointed the spatula at me and told me I could not afford a baby and that I lived a boring little budget life. I remember staring at her and feeling something inside me go very quiet. Not broken, quiet. Like a room after the power goes out. I did not argue about passion. I did not argue about destiny. I told her the court would care about paperwork, not speeches. I told her paternity would be contested. I told her the hospital had already been notified not to list me. I told her if the child was mine, I would step up. If it was his, he would pay the bill. She did not like that answer. She tried to turn it into a moral lecture. She said I was small. She said I nickel-and-dimed life. She said real men provide. I told her real men do not let emotions erase evidence. Then I handed her the packet. Tabs, receipts, hotel records, bank records, and the transfer. She saw the folder and finally understood this was not a conversation. It was a process. A few days later, I returned to the house to finish moving my things. She was at the counter with a smoothie, acting like this was still a normal household. I told her she had been served. I told her temporary orders were active. I told her I was there for my last items from the office and garage. She tried to keep talking about fairness and passion and how I did not understand her. I did not need to understand her. I needed to finish. I went through the house room by room. My tools were tagged and photographed. My passports and tax binders were already secured. I had the router reset. I had the garage opener accounted for. I had the locksmith scheduled. She kept trying to make it emotional, but I had already moved past emotion. She said Logan loved her more in one night than I had in 5 years. I told her that was fine. Let him love her through a rough month and a state withholding. She left angry. I locked the door behind her and let the house go quiet again. That was the moment everything changed. The first few days after that were the hardest. Not because I missed the fighting, because I was still carrying the shock. There is a strange numbness that comes after you find out your life was built on a lie. You keep moving, but part of you is still standing in the kitchen hearing words you cannot unhear. Brina did not take the separation well. She tried to come back more than once. The first time, she showed up with a suitcase and a speech about needing stability. The temporary orders gave me exclusive possession of the home, so I kept the chain on the door and told her to use her lawyer. She said I was abandoning a family. I told her she had already abandoned the marriage. Then she tried again when my girlfriend, Vanessa, was there. Vanessa is quiet and competent, and she had been helping me sort tools and inventory what was mine. Brina pounded on the door, circled the house, and tried the back entrance. I had already rekeyed everything and secured the spare key situation. When she realized she could not get in, she started shouting. She threw a fake rock at the glass. It did not break, but it did get the police called. 2 officers showed up. They took the report, checked the temporary orders, and listened to her story. I showed them the paperwork. The body cameras did the rest. She tried to push past them to get to Vanessa, and that turned into an attempted assault. They cuffed her and took her away. I got the report number and filed it with the rest of the evidence. A week later, the court granted a 1-year restraining order. No calls, no texts, no showing up, no third-party messages. If she contacts me, it becomes a violation. I did not celebrate. I just scanned the order and added it to the folder. Logan disappeared around the time the delivery date got closer. His texts went from confident to short to nothing. One day he was acting like a man with a plan, and the next he was gone. That told me everything I needed to know about how serious he had been. I think what hurt most was not what they did, it was what it meant. It meant I had been living beside someone who was willing to rewrite reality whenever it suited her. It meant she saw me as a placeholder while she chased a version of herself that had nothing to do with marriage. It meant Logan was not some tragic love story. He was just another man who liked the thrill until the consequences arrived. Grief is strange. It does not always look the way you expect. I did not cry every day. Sometimes I just stood in the garage looking at my tools and feeling like the floor had shifted under my entire life. Sometimes I was angry. Sometimes I was embarrassed. Sometimes I was relieved, which made me feel guilty. I had to sit with all of that at once. What I learned about myself is that I am calmer under pressure than I ever realized. I also learned that calm can turn into cold if you are not careful. I do not regret protecting my credit, my assets, or my future. I do not regret documenting everything. I do not regret refusing to let emotion wreck my finances. But I do regret how long I ignored the signs because I wanted the marriage to be what I thought it was. If I could go back, I would have asked harder questions sooner. I would have trusted the discomfort. I would have treated the first warning like a warning instead of a nuisance. That is the part that stays with me, not the betrayal itself, but the fact that I kept trying to make it make sense. I want to give you an update because a lot has changed. The paternity test is still pending through the court, and I am not guessing about the result. I am waiting for the paperwork like everything else. If the child is mine, I will do what I have to do. If the child is Logan's, then that is his responsibility, not mine. The divorce is moving forward. My premarital property stayed protected. My truck, my tools, and my credit are intact. The house is still under my possession order for now, and the restraining order is in place. Brina has not been able to come near me without consequences. Logan has stayed out of sight. That says more than either of them ever could. Vanessa has been a steady presence through all of this, but I am being careful. I am not rushing into anything. I have learned that stability matters more than intensity. I used to think love was about chemistry and shared jokes and the feeling that you could not imagine life without someone. Now I think love also has to include honesty, restraint, and respect when nobody is watching. I am not pretending this ended neatly. It did not. There are still court dates. There is still a child involved. There are still pieces of my old life that I have to sort through. But I am no longer standing in the middle of a lie and calling it home. That matters more than I can explain. So I have to ask you, if your spouse betrayed you, lied about a pregnancy, and kept dragging you into the fallout, would you protect your future the way I did, even if it made you look cold? Because I still think about it, and I genuinely do not know if I made the right call. Leave your answer in the comments. I read every single one, and if you want more stories like this, you already know what to do.